Okay, so have you ever been in a workplace and just felt like maybe everyone else got a memo about the unspoken rules? You know, the stuff you just didn't quite get.
Uh-huh. Or maybe you've seen someone get ahead, you think, okay, they're good, but it feels like something else is going on, something beyond just like the listed skills.
Exactly that feeling. It's surprisingly common, I think.
Oh, definitely. That sense of being just a little out of sync, like you're navigating these invisible currents.
Right. And our deep dive today is really digging into a fascinating argument about this. It suggests that this invisible factor is often deeply connected to something we barely talk about openly at work.
Economic class.
Yeah, economic class. We're exploring the ideas from the book Hidden Rules of Class at Work by Ruby K. Payne and Don L. Krabil.
And their whole premise is pretty powerful.
Yeah.
It's that the economic world you grew up in, it shapes this very specific set of hidden rules, these unconscious cues, habits.
Mhm.
They helped you navigate that world.
And they don't just vanish when you clock in, right? They come right along with you.
Exactly. They influence your behavior, how you're perceived, whether you seem to fit in.
So our mission here really is to unpack the core ideas from their research. We want to look at these key hidden rules and also the vital resources they talk about.
Yeah, and it's not about judging people or boxing them in. It's more about um, shedding light on these dynamics. So hopefully you can understand them better, maybe navigate your own career path a bit more effectively.
Right. Let's unpack this. Where do we start?
Well, the foundational idea is that your economic background creates a specific reality, and that reality hammers in these hidden rules. They're basically the unconscious framework you use to figure out, do I belong here? Is this safe? Are these my people?
It's like the survival code for your home turf. And that code sticks.
It really does. Now, life's messy. People move around, obviously. But the book talks broadly about different economic contexts: generational poverty, working class, middle class, and then wealth, sometimes split into new money and old money.
And the dominant hidden rules for each can be really different.
Oh, strikingly different. Take money, for example. In generational poverty, the hidden rule might be heavily focused on managing income to expenses. Day-to-day survival. Relationships are often paramount. Money might be shared or borrowed pretty freely within the family or close network.
It's about immediate needs and sticking together.
Whereas you contrast that with, say, wealth, especially old money, the focus shifts completely. Money isn't really discussed directly. It's about assets generating income, investments, preserving and growing wealth over generations.
And the rules around connections are different too, right?
Hugely different, like introductions. In many wealthy circles, the hidden rule is you don't introduce yourself. You are introduced. And that introduction places you, your family, your firm, your key connections.
Ah, so it signals your standing within that network.
Precisely. They mention if you're just introduced as, say, a personal friend, in some contexts, it can subtly signal you don't have the right kind of connections there. It's a completely different operating system.
Wow, that's subtle but speaks volumes. It really shows how different experiences bake in different expectations. Things that feel totally normal in one place are just alien somewhere else.
Yeah, and the book uses these survival quizzes. They're hypothetical. Like, what specific knowledge or behaviors would you need to survive at different job levels? Unskilled labor, first-line supervisor, middle management, executive.
Right. Could you make it based on those behaviors? It really drives home how the expectations just ratchet up and change.
And that brings us to their core model. It's pretty simple, actually. You've got the individual and you've got the organization.
Okay.
The individual brings their resources, their connections, and their hidden rules. The organization also has its resources, its connections, and its own set of prevailing hidden rules.
And success, or maybe the friction you feel, comes down to how well those two sides, the individual stuff and the organization stuff, mesh or don't mesh.
Exactly. And a really key point they make is that most supervisory and management roles tend to operate based on middle-class hidden roles.
Which can be a real barrier if you grew up with a different set.
It could be a significant hurdle, yeah.
Okay, so hidden rules are the framework. But the book goes further, right? It says thriving isn't just about knowing the rules. It's also tied to resources.
Yes, absolutely. Resources are critical. They argue that success and stability aren't just about how smart you are or what skills you have on paper. It's about this whole package of resources you possess or can access.
And they list quite a few.
They do. 9 key ones: financial, emotional support systems, spiritual, physical, relationships, desire, mental, and integrity.
And integrity is highlighted.
Very much so. They present integrity as the absolute foundation, especially when it comes to promotion and trust. It's the non-negotiable.
Okay, let's dive into some of these then. Starting with integrity and trust. How do they define that?
It's basically the alignment between what you do and your internal moral or ethical code. Consistency. It builds trust because it makes you predictable. People know where you stand. They feel safe.
And why is that so critical, especially moving up?
Well, think about it. Higher levels mean bigger decisions, more impact. You absolutely need accurate information. You need people who follow laws and policies. You need reliable financial oversight. Someone whose actions don't line up with a solid ethical code, that's a massive risk.
Yeah, I can see that.
And at the top, you often have to make tough calls, maybe unpopular ones. Being respected for sticking to your principles is way more important than just being liked.
They give examples, right, of different levels of integrity.
Yeah, using a rubric from 0 to 4. So level 0 or 1 might be like Fred, the guy who took kickbacks for company tires, or Jason, who used company stuff for his side hustle but then fired someone else for something minor. It signals unpredictability, self-interest over ethics.
Right, versus the higher end.
Levels 3 or 4 are people who are consistently ethical, who take responsibility even when it's hard. Like the CEO example they use, he had to eliminate his friend's job because strategically it was the right move for the company. Painful, but principled.
And the book's advice is pretty blunt on this.
Very blunt. Avoid hiring people at levels 0 or 1 integrity. Only promote those at 3 or 4. Full stop.
And the research they did backed this up.
It did. They found a strong correlation between high integrity scores and also having high emotional resources, strong nurturing relationships, and high desire or motivation. And interestingly, a very high correlation between someone's actual job title and their measured integrity score.
So it really suggests that understanding your own integrity and being able to gauge it in others, it's not just about being a good person. It's fundamental to workplace trust and, well, getting ahead.
That's the argument they make, yes. It's a core building block.
Okay, let's shift to emotional resources. This isn't just about being, like, emotionally stable, is it? It's more specific.
It's much more than just being nice or calm.
Yeah.
They define it as your capacity to handle conflict constructively, to actually listen effectively, and crucially, to separate your personal feelings from the objective issues when you're trying to solve a problem.
Emotional regulation under fire, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. Emotional stamina when things get tense.
And the book connects this to communication styles, doesn't it? How background influences how we talk and argue.
Absolutely. They talk about different language registers, casual versus formal, and they reference research, like Anita Hart's work, showing significant differences in vocabulary size and complexity linked to environment.
So growing up in poverty might lead to a more concrete communication style.
Often, yes. More focused on specific events, people, and maybe less on abstract concepts or using formal registers. Whereas the professional world, especially higher up, increasingly demands abstract thinking and communication, what the book calls intellectual capital.
And if you're stuck in that concrete way of communicating, it makes resolving issues harder.
Much harder. Because if you can only talk about specific incidents or how you feel personally, he did this, she said that, it's really difficult to elevate the conversation to the issue level. You know, talking about the process, the policy, the objective outcome.
It stays personal instead of becoming about the problem.
Exactly. They use the simple example of a couple arguing over which one the cat loves more, when the real underlying abstract issue is about feeling loved and valued themselves. They're stuck arguing the concrete details instead of the core problem.
Okay. And they mention specific things that sabotage conflict resolution, stemming from low emotional resources.
Yeah, 3 big ones. First is using non-adult voices. Slipping into that judgmental parent voice, or maybe a whining, manipulative child voice, instead of sticking to the adult voice, which is about facts, asking clarifying questions, taking responsibility.
Like transactional analysis ideas.
Based on Eric Berney's work, yes. The second is creating win-lose power struggles, making everything a competition instead of seeking solutions.
And the third one they really emphasize is triangling.
Triangling, huge one. That's when you have a problem with person B, but instead of talking to person B.
You talk about person B to person C.
Exactly. You vent, you gossip, you complain to a third party. It avoids direct conflict, sure, but it's incredibly inefficient. It breeds mistrust, wastes tons of time and energy in the organization. They're very clear. Companies pay a big price for triangling.
So building emotional resources means learning to use that adult voice, trying to separate the personal from the objective, and facing issues directly.
That's the core of it. And their research found a high correlation between emotional resources and that crucial integrity score we talked about.
Ah, that makes sense.
Yeah, if you can control your impulses, handle conflict constructively, you're seen as more predictable, more trustworthy.
Yeah.
So improving that emotional stamina, your communication skills, it's presented as vital for working well with others and for leadership potential.
Okay. Next up, mental resources. And again, this isn't just IQ points, right?
Correct. It's more about the ability to move from concrete hands-on experiences to abstract thinking and the ability to build and use mental models.
Mental models, like blueprints.
Exactly. Frameworks, analogies, ways of understanding complex systems or concepts. They argue that while survival in poverty often requires being really adept in the concrete, nonverbal world, the modern workplace relies more and more on abstract verbal skills that really builds this intellectual capital again.
So what kinds of abstract skills are needed?
Well, a big one is an abstract sense of time, not just telling time, but planning backward from a goal,
Hmm.
estimating accurately how long complex projects will take, managing multiple deadlines. It's like Covey's begin with the end in mind.
Planning and sequencing.
Right. Also, things like sorting information using patterns, understanding part-to-whole thinking. How does this small task fit into the bigger project or strategy? And controlling impulsivity, which they directly link to planning.
Oh, so.
They suggest that if you can't plan effectively, it's harder to delay gratification or resist immediate emotional reactions. Written goals, they argue, act like filters, helping your brain focus on what's relevant to achieve them. Without that plan, actions can be more impulsive.
They give examples of this, like someone struggling to write a formal letter.
Yeah, difficulty organizing thoughts, using the right abstract language, structuring the argument logically, or the importance of developing mental models of your job, your department, the whole company, understanding the why behind things, not just the how.
So you can solve problems that aren't just surface level.
Precisely. Someone with high mental resources can apply these abstract models, they can plan effectively, and their words and actions tend to line up because they've thought things through.
And did their research link this to anything else?
Yes, they found a correlation between high mental scores and having a strong support system and also high desire or motivation.
Interesting. So developing these abstract thinking and planning skills is positioned as crucial for managing complexity and showing you're ready for bigger roles.
That is the takeaway, yeah.
All right, financial resources. This seems straightforward, but they add a behavioral layer.
Right. It's not just about how much you earn, it's about how you manage what you earn. Saving, investing. They see it as reflecting self-discipline and planning ability.
And they contrast different class perspectives on money.
Yeah, drawing on ideas maybe familiar from things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Contrasting a poverty-focused income mainly covers immediate expenses with a middle-class-focused income managing liabilities, maybe acquiring assets like a house, and then a wealth-focused assets generating income using leverage, thinking long-term.
And personal financial stress can spill over into work.
Absolutely. If you're constantly worried about bills, getting calls from creditors, needing advances, like the example Ron they mentioned, that's a huge distraction and stressor that obviously impacts your focus and effectiveness at work.
And moving up requires understanding more complex financial stuff.
Definitely. Especially towards executive levels, you need to understand balance sheets, cash flow, risk management, maybe even things like trusts and generational wealth planning. It's a whole different level of financial literacy beyond just managing a personal budget.
And what did their research show here?
This was striking. They found an almost precise correlation between job title and financial resources in their study group.
Wow. So the book essentially suggests that how you handle your own money is seen as a pretty strong indicator of the behaviors and planning skills needed for higher responsibility at work.
That seems to be the implication, yes. It's viewed as a reflection of broader capabilities.
Okay, let's tackle relationships and support systems. They're linked, you said.
Yes, the research found strong correlations between them. Let's start with relationships. This is about your ability to form and maintain nurturing, mutually respectful connections.
They quote Dr. James Comer.
No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship of mutual respect. That's the quote. Basically, the ability to build positive bonds matters.
And they bring up identity here, too.
Yeah, the idea that if work is unstable or unavailable, identity might shift more towards traditional gender roles like fighter or lover for men, caretakers or rescuer for women. And sometimes those ingrained roles can bring behaviors into the workplace that are problematic, like fighting or potential harassment issues.
That's an interesting angle, and promotion often requires a time sacrifice.
Yes, especially during steep learning curves. you might need to temporarily pull back from personal relationships to focus intensely on the new role. Can someone navigate that shift healthily?
And the rubric shows different levels here, too.
Right. From someone with few or destructive relationships, like the examples Kitty or Jackson, all the way up to someone like Dolores or Gerald Cook, who have wide, supportive networks and actively mentor others.
And the research findings for relationships.
Strong correlation with integrity, spiritual resources, and naturally support systems. And an interesting note, in their study, women tended to have higher relationship resource scores than men.
Okay, so support systems then. What's the definition?
That's your network, friends, family, colleagues, institutions that provide practical help. Money, time, advice, emotional backup, know-how. It includes people, but also abstract systems like having good insurance, access to childcare, lawyers, accountants, etc.
And the demands from your support system can impact work.
Hugely. If you're the primary support for children, aging parents, or dealing with frequent family crises, like the Sally example, that directly impacts your time, energy, and availability for work. Especially when finances are tight, family often has to come first.
And the rubric here contrasts being alone with having different kinds of networks.
Exactly. From being isolated to maybe having a support system, but one that doesn't understand the hidden rules of your professional world, like Daniel and Sharon feeling out of place at the country club. Then higher levels include support systems that do understand the professional context, maybe even including work colleagues, and also having access to those abstract systems, like paid help or professional services, like Anita and Roy adapting their lives to support his career.
And the research link for support systems.
High support systems correlated positively with high mental, spiritual, and relationship scores. And here's a finding that often sparks discussion. Their study found single women without children and married men tended to receive more promotions.
Which they link to potentially having fewer demands on their time for maintaining extensive support networks outside of work.
That was the connection they drew, yes. Fewer competing demands on time and energy.
So the takeaway for both relationships and support systems is that building and maintaining healthy connections, both personal and professional, and having robust support. It's not just nice for you personally, it's presented as a critical resource for stability and getting ahead professionally.
That's the core message. They're vital resources.
All right, spiritual resources. How does this fit in?
This is tied to beliefs about destiny, purpose, and locus of control. Do you feel like you're mostly a victim of fate? Or do you believe your choices shape your life?
Internal versus external locus of control.
Exactly. In the workplace, having a sense of agency, believing you have choices, can bring energy, hope, resilience, especially if you feel your work connects to some larger purpose or meaning for you.
So low spiritual resources might look like feeling powerless, blaming the system, or bad luck.
Right. While high spiritual resources would be someone who believes their thoughts and actions determine their future, maybe they're involved in causes bigger than themselves. They see purpose in what they do.
And the research connection.
High spiritual resources correlated with having healthy support systems and nurturing relationships. So your personal sense of purpose or belief system can really fuel your resilience and engagement at work.
Okay. Physical resources. This one can feel a bit tricky sometimes.
It can, but the book includes it. It's defined pretty basically.
Yeah.
Ability to care for yourself, your physical appearance, including things like grooming, fitness, weight, and your overall energy level.
Does appearance really matter that much?
Well, the book references research suggesting it does impact hiring and promotion. And just think about your energy level that clearly impacts your performance and how others perceive your capability.
They mention clothing, too, as a class indicator.
Briefly, yeah. Suggesting patterns like old money favoring understated quality and fit, new money maybe being more about visible brands or flash, middle class prioritizing durability and easy care. They cite John Malloy's older research on dressing for success, even noting the perceived importance of a spouse's appearance at executive levels.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But their own study found.
Interestingly, in their specific study group, which was mostly mid-management and above, they did not find a statistically significant correlation between physical resources and the other resources.
So a bit of a mixed message there.
Perhaps. But the book still includes it as a factor that contributes to overall perception and self-management in a professional setting. How you present yourself matters, even if the direct link to other resources wasn't clear in their specific data set.
Got it. Lastly, desire and persistence.
Yeah, this is your drive, your motivation, willpower, your grit, really. the push to achieve.
And this one was strongly linked to outcomes in their research.
Very strongly. Desire was found to be a key factor correlating with both job title and income earned.
And there was a specific finding about gender and background here too, wasn't there?
Yes, that was notable. Their study indicated a direct correlation between growing up in poverty and having a high drive to succeed, specifically for men in their sample. They didn't find that same strong correlation for women from similar backgrounds in their group.
And overall, men scored higher on desire persistence in their study.
They did. High desire was also correlated with high integrity, high mental resources, and high spiritual resources.
And the examples show the range.
Right. From someone with low desire, like Lauren, whose job just funded his racing hobby, to someone like Tanasia, the bookkeeper, who was motivated by being right and controlling information. Then higher levels like Carlos, who wanted recognition but wouldn't challenge norms, up to the highest level, someone driven by challenge itself, wanting excellence, like the Thomas Edison example of relentless persistence. The reward is the achievement, not just external validation.
So understanding your own drivers, what really motivates you, and how persistent you are, that's crucial for finding the right path and pushing through difficulties.
Absolutely critical, according to this framework.
Okay, so we've walked through these individual resources. But the book then brings it back to the organization, right? The organization has its own rules, too.
Exactly. The hidden rules aren't just personal. They operate at different levels within the company. The whole operating system can shift.
How so?
Well, think about it. Blue-collar environments might highly value physical skill and effort. Mid-management often prizes task completion, efficiency, managing process as well.
But the executive level is different again.
Very different. It becomes much more about leveraging connections, understanding strategy, seeing the big picture, influencing others. It's less about doing the task yourself and more about orchestrating things.
So that leap from being a great manager of tasks to being a strategic leader who works through relationships, that's a major transition.
It's a critical shift. And networking isn't just about schmoozing for promotions. At higher levels, it's presented as absolutely essential for getting the accurate, timely information you need, accessing expertise outside your own area.
They give examples of executives needing context for crucial data.
Yes, like Antoine needing informal channels to get production numbers, or Melissa needing connections to understand the implications of a merger. Formal channels aren't always enough. If you don't cultivate those networks, your connections can end up on life support, as they put it.
Meaning you get excluded.
Yeah, socially excluded, calls not returned, not looped into key conversations. It signals you're not really part of the inner circle, not trusted or valued at that level.
So understanding the specific hidden rules of the level you're in, and especially the level you want to get to, that's vital for navigating effectively.
It's essential. The point isn't whether the rules are fair or right, but acknowledging they exist and they operate differently at different altitudes in the organization. You need to know the code to play the game, essentially.
And this brings us back to fit.
Right. It loops back to that idea of organizational fit. You could be a high-resource individual on paper, but if your specific mix of resources, connections, and rules doesn't align well with the organization's culture, its current needs, its own health, you might still struggle. The organization's state matters too.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, the book Hidden Rules of Class at Work really makes a powerful argument, doesn't it? That our economic background profoundly shapes these hidden rules and the resources we develop.
And that this whole package, in turn, has a deep, often invisible impact on how we behave, how we interact, and what opportunities we get in the workplace.
And the goal, as the author stated, isn't about judging anyone or any class. It's about providing understanding. For supervisors trying to manage diverse teams and for employees trying to navigate their careers.
Exactly. Understanding this mosaic, as they call it, this mix of backgrounds and rules, is crucial for better communication, for actually tapping into people's potential, their intellectual capital, and ultimately for making better decisions about people.
It's framed as really fundamental for both individuals and organizations to, well, survive and thrive.
Because that intellectual capital, which comes from all these diverse experiences and ways of thinking shaped by different hidden rules, that's really the engine of the modern economy. Unlocking it means seeing and valuing the unique individuality everyone brings.
So here's a thought to leave you with. Building on that idea of the workplace as this rich mosaic, If you start thinking about your colleagues, your team, even your boss through this lens, recognizing they might be operating with different hidden rules shaped by very different backgrounds, how might that change how you approach things?
Yeah, how might your understanding of these dynamics shift the way you collaborate, the way you communicate, or maybe even how you handle disagreements or conflicts with people whose starting points might be quite different from your own?
Something to consider as you navigate your own professional world.